In my last video, I went on to explain that I believe Bonelab should stop updating sooner rather than later. It got what I'd consider to be mixed reception, and that makes sense considering a lot of key factors and how it seems without the full context. First off though, I want to explain that Bonelab updating is not a bad thing. I tried to make this clear in the original, although either some people missed that point because of the title or outright didn't watch the video, so I'm saying it right at the start so that it cannot possibly be missed this time around. Bonelab updates are good. I've never said otherwise, as I don't believe otherwise. The updates this game has been receiving have been very useful for modders, and because of such, I don't blame people who disagree that Bonelab should keep updating. I think it ultimately comes down to personal preference, and my personal preference is that the game should stop updating. The most popular comment on the video was Bonelab players when no update, and Bonelab players when update, which I feel like misses some of the key points of the video entirely. No one is upset that the game is updating. The game updating is and has been a good thing. It's one of the first things said in the video. But if the game were to hypothetically update for the next 2 years, then we'd probably never see any big projects, as the base SDK isn't good enough and it will take more time than it is worth for the SDK to become good enough, in my personal opinion. I believe that the extended SDK can fill this gap in the meantime while SLZ works on another game. Ideally, none of this should have been a problem in the first place if the game released in a fully finished state with a featureful SDK, but I figured that was a given, so I didn't even mention it in the video, as saying Bonelab is an unfinished game is redundant at this point. Most people were able to pick up on and understand this, while others missed this point and made it seem as if the game being unfinished was somehow the community's fault. Like somehow people asking for the game to release sooner, something that happens with almost every game ever made, resulted in pressuring SLZ enough to decide to not finish their game and release it anyway. This is the same company that was not pressured into telling us anything about the state of development for the already released game for almost 2 years, while we waited for an update, with the only thing being known about said update at the time being that it's gonna release one day, and when it does, all of your hard work on your big projects will be wiped along with it. From the patch 3 era, where people were asking for updates, the end goal has remained the same: get as many great mods as possible. At the time, knowing that Bonelab was gonna update severely limited what modders were willing to do, and that has not changed. 711 by Babacorp, the most downloaded and most popular mod for all of Bonelab on Mod.io, was waiting to do a big update once Bonelab updated. Now Bonelab has updated, and it's still the same problem for Babacorp, as the SDK tools don't provide him with the resources to make that update, and ultimately, he seems to have just decided to redo the map entirely and update using only the base SDK to avoid the headache. This goes for all of Babacorp's mods now, as he only uses the base SDK, so that he won't need to deal with mod breaking updates, but that also means his mods are limited by what the base SDK contains, leading to a noticeable lack of interactability as a player. Don't get it twisted though, like I've said for what feels like hundreds of times now, updates are good. It's just that no updates could also be good, and based on what we've seen in the past with patch 3, I'd argue no updates can be even better. To add on to this, I went ahead and asked some modders if they think the game should update. Here's Lakatraz, creator of Fusion, and the port of Duck Season, essentially saying that if the game doesn't get some real big features such as grips in the SDK, then we won't get back to the state of modding we were in during patch 3, and wraps it up by saying if future patches don't break mods, then that's totally fine. To add a bit more context onto my thoughts of the matter, I'm going under the impression that updates will be breaking extended SDK mods in the future, and not that the updates won't be breaking anything. Here's another modder, Hazzy, saying hell nah. But the point here isn't just to say I'm right, you're wrong. What I'm trying to convey is that neither side is right or wrong. Like I said at the start, it comes down to personal preference. Here's Swipes and Hunter, two pretty big modders, saying they do believe the game should update. And while I think the game would be better if it stopped updating, I can completely understand and agree that the game continuing updates would also be a good thing, as there would ultimately be more tools in the base SDK, and those SDK compliant mods already have nothing to worry about as is, and get new features alongside updates. Again, most people in the last video understood this, advocated for their side while understanding the other side. but a lot of others I feel didn't even watch the video or give it a chance, and that's greatly disappointing. I'm sure this video will also be filled with similar comments of people missing the point, as no matter how many reiterations and no matter how clear I make it that I do think updates are good, despite wanting the game to end its update cycle, someone is going to miss that point or another point mentioned in either videos. The only reason I felt a follow-up was logical this time around was because I do feel as if I could have made some points more clear overall, like how I completely forgot to mention that if the game stops updating, SLZ can then focus on their next game, B-Side, something they confirmed they are not doing at this moment while working on Bonelab. Another thing I didn't mention is that modding your game with Lemon Loader on Quest is a pain in the ass, and it only gets more annoying having to repatch your game each update. I completely understand that it's not SLZ's problem to support code mods, but right now, code mods simply outperform some very basic problems with SLZ's base game. Mod.io Mod Networker lets you browse and download mods in-game and delete mods as well. This is very standard mod manager stuff that SLZ's very own built system cannot accomplish. You can only download mods you are already subscribed to, cannot delete mods without an external file manager, and if you want to download just one new mod, the game will re-download every single mod you're subscribed to, and even worse, it will literally fail when given some bigger mods. I'm asking for SLZ to either at least have the bare minimum in support for modding like any mod-focused game should, or stop updating and let the modders do it themselves if they won't. Which, given the updates so far, I don't believe they will, so I hope they just end support and let modders fix it. I would love to be proven wrong in these upcoming updates and for SLZ to implement proper mod managing into the game, but part of the reason I want the game to stop updating is because if they don't implement such basic functions, then every time the game updates, we have to go without these basic functions until modders do it themselves. Back on track to the point of this video specifically though, I saw a comment say that they haven't seen modders complain, so I gave a list of more modders. It seemed people thought I hated the fact that Bonelab was updating, so I'm making it more clear that I like updates and made it clear that liking updates is also completely reasonable as well. And overall, I feel this video should clear up any confusion that may have been had with the last. And one thing I think all of us can agree on, regardless of if you want more updates or if you want the game to stop updating, I think we can all agree that this is on SLZ for not finishing the game. But another thing we can all agree on is that we should be grateful that they at least fixed their mistake and have made Bonelab a much better game than it was when it released. Final notes before you leave, you can get 10% off literally any game on the Quest store using the link in the description. Since I'm a Quest affiliate now, it helps us both out, so you might as well just use it. You get games for cheaper. I don't see why you wouldn't. And thank you so much for hearing me out all the way until the end, and I appreciate you coming here, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.